Welcome back to Hardball. President Obama's top commander in Afghanistan wants a troop buildup of maybe 40,000 troops to protect the local population and beat back the Taliban, which is on the march. But some of the president's advisors are balking at a big troop increase and instead are considering a more narrow strategy of just targeting al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So what are the consequences of each plan? Frank Gaffney, a buddy of ours, is a former Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Reagan administration. He's also president, I love these groups, of the Center for Security Policy. And Ron Reagan is a radio talk show host who does not lead any institute that I know of. Frank, I want you guys to give me their philosophies, because we're not getting into technicalities here tonight. There's two philosophies. I want to hear both of them tonight. Yours first. Your role, your belief of what our role should be in Afghanistan vis-a-vis this apparent call for a big troop buildup.
I believe, Chris, that we are facing a global problem, of which the front in Afghanistan is just one piece. I think you need to deal with the Afghan front as part of that larger story, because you can't afford to lose there. As a result, my assessment is we're confronting people, not just the al-Qaeda types, not just the Taliban, but lots of folks who embrace something called Sharia, what traditional or authoritative Islam believes is to be imposed on all of us non-Muslim as well as Muslims alike. These guys will not stop at Afghanistan. They would like to defeat us there. I think we have an obligation to try to ensure that doesn't happen in Afghanistan, but I think we got to be clear. Win, lose, or draw in Afghanistan, this war is not going to be over. It is going to be fought on battlefields far afield from Afghanistan. It'll just be harder if we have cut and run, if we have collapsed, if we have otherwise been ridden out of town on a rail from Afghanistan.
Well said. We know that worldview. It's Sharia we're facing. We're facing the front of Sharia rule, the zealous brand of Islam, and with all that it means about women and their lack of rights, et cetera, and their attitude towards the world. Now, Ron Reagan, your view of Afghanistan, what our view should be.
Well, my view is that you don't commit American lives to a mission that you can't define. We can't define what victory in Afghanistan really is. Defeating the Taliban? That's not why we went there in the first place. Let me ask you this question. If on September 12th, let's say, the situation in Afghanistan was as it is now, in other words, Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, a corrupt but nominally pro-Western government in power in Kabul, and the Taliban threatening, would that have been a pretext for us to send troops into Afghanistan then? I think not. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, why are we still there now? Now, Frank is absolutely right that this is a global problem, but it doesn't follow that there is a central front, therefore, in Afghanistan. The central front is everywhere, if you will. And if we want to deprive al-Qaeda of a base of operations in Afghanistan, well, we might just as well deprive them of a base in Somalia or Yemen or any one of a number of other countries where they are.
Okay, what would be let me go back to Frank. The consequences of us pulling out of Afghanistan, because General McChrystal seems to be saying if we don't go in bigger, we might as well leave because we can't win the mission we're seeking to win right now with the troops we have. So if we pull out, if we don't do what he wants us to do, what are the consequences?
Well, he said, you wanted a counterinsurgency strategy, Mr. President, here's what it's going to take. It's more people. We don't follow that advice, and we are, I think, going to find it very difficult to prevent the Sharia adherent types, including the Taliban, from reestablishing effective control over most of the country, if not all of it. The point is that there will be, both in Afghanistan then and in a lot of other places, people who are redoubled in their conviction that their triumph is inevitable, that the United States is another superpower that they're going to defeat, and that ultimately they will succeed in doing what Allah has told them pursuant to Sharia, which is imposing this global theocracy over the whole world. So I'm concerned that we lose in Afghanistan. It doesn't necessarily translate into the caliphate, but it is one more step, and it will definitely cause a redoubling of the effort against us elsewhere.
Doing something wise in Afghanistan is not losing in Afghanistan. We've got to be smart about this. We can't be worrying about what people living in caves in Pakistan might think of us if we do the intelligent thing here. Now, there are things we can do in Afghanistan that don't involve necessarily putting a lot more troops in there. For instance, what worked in Iraq? Well, it was when we started paying and arming holding tribal warlords there. We can do the same in Afghanistan. Let's exploit the system that has been in place there for, God knows how many centuries, with tribal warlords holding most of the power. If we can convince them that it's in their best interest to get rid of the Taliban in their region, the Taliban won't be there. As long as they've got the firepower to pull that off, they're going to kick the Taliban out.
Yeah.
Would you have advised the Soviets to stay
if I just may say this, Chris, the actual lesson of Iraq was you buy off guys that you can, but you've got to be backstopping that with the presence of your forces there.
Okay.
I think what we're starting to see as those American forces come out, even though we're continuing to try to pay people off, is things are not going well and they're likely to go a lot worse.
The British ruled in Afghanistan and were basically massacred. The Soviets ruled in Afghanistan, and thanks to our support for the Mujahideen, they were thrown out thanks to the Stingers, etc., etc. If you would advise those two powers, would you have advised them to stay, Frank?
Well, look, I'm not
Would you have advised them to stay?
I'm not suggesting that we occupy Afghanistan, which is what those two countries tried to do. I'm saying that we partner up with Afghans, we evolve this thing in the direction that allows them to take responsibility for their country, but we have to recognize that no matter how you dress it up, what Ron is suggesting here is abandoning the place, doing the smart thing, and getting out. That is going to result in the takeover of the Taliban, and I don't think that would serve us.
Do you believe Karzai was honestly reelected?
No.
But we support a guy over there who stole an election. That's okay with you?
We're not supporting him so clearly anymore. Let's be honest.
You said partner up with him. You just said partner up with him.
No, I'm talking about the Afghan people, the Afghan military, the Afghan police services.
Yeah, okay. Well, you just said partner up with Karzai who stole an election.
No,
now you're saying...
You said Karzai. Chris, don't misquote me. I said partner up with the Afghans.
Karzai's the president of the country.
Partner up with the Afghans is my exact statement. And the point is that
how do you do that without partnering with their government?
Karzai may or may not be the president of the country much longer. We'll see. That's not clear right now.
Okay,
I'm
not
focusing it on backstopping Karzai. I'm talking about trying to have the Afghan people take responsibility for their security as fast as they can. It just isn't going to happen today.
And that will take decades. What Frank is talking about in other terms here is nation building, and that will take decades in a country that is basically medieval. Are we going to be there for decades? I don't think so.
It is security building. And hey, look, it was your guys who were telling us this is a war of necessity. The president said this very clearly.
It was, but
he was saying it. He was saying it when he was elected president, and Bin Laden may or may not be there.
First of all, don't call them my guys because I'm independent.
Well, I hate to see Karzai steal the election.
Tingling the leg.
No, I hate no. Oh, don't. That's below the belt, Frankie boy.
Chris.
Okay, yeah. Let me know. Frank Gaffney, who wants to partner up with Karzai, although it's not really Karzai anymore. He says we got a problem here. It's called Afghanistan. Thank you, Frank Gaffney.
Thank you,
Ron Reagan.